Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Today in True Crime and Portraits podcast. I'm your host, Jane Flowers. On today's episode 12, I'll be talking about a true crime story and current events associated with my life. I will be discussing the fact that the Greenwood, Mississippi Police Department lost my police report about the breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund that was once held at Melton's law firm in Greenwood, Mississippi. For those of you that are just now listening to my podcast and are not aware of what's going on with me in my personal life, well, I'd like to let you know that I have a breach of fiduciary with my trust fund with Melton Law Firm and Trustmark Bank in Greenwood, Mississippi. I have been investigating my own case because the police last year with the Attorney General's office and the U.S. Attorney's office in Oxford, Mississippi refused to get involved and help with the investigation with my case. Just recently this week, I became aware of that my police report about the breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund from March 2020 that the Greenwood Police Department investigated last year was missing from their records department. I recently called the Greenwood Police Department Records Department this week and spoke to Miss Stokes. Miss Stokes informed me that my police report was not there in their records department. Later, I would speak to the Chief of Police of the Greenwood Police Department, Chief Kraft. He informed me that he looked into the database with the police department and he could not find my police report. I told him that it originally was opened up in Jackson, Mississippi, and he told me that since the police report number was originally from Jackson, Mississippi, he suspects that they're probably going to have to just do a new police report in Greenwood. Or I can contact Jackson, Mississippi, and have them reopen the case and have their detectives work on the case. This is what I was understanding from him when we spoke over the phone about how he thought I should handle getting my case reopened and the police report amended. I enjoyed my conversation with the Chief of Police more so than I did the conversation I had with former Chief of Police Mr. Jody Bradley last year. Chief of Police Mr. Kraft came off to me as a more experienced police officer. Chief of Police Mr. Kraft's working experience as an officer within the Greenwood Police Department was spoken about in articles that I read on the internet, and I was so impressed with what I read about the chief that I have faith that he will be helpful with my case properly investigated by one of his detectives within his police department. I was not surprised by what I read in an article that speaks about Chief Kraft being appointed police chief in the Greenwood Police Department. I want to share now with you all the article I read about Chief of Police Mr. Kraft. Here's what it said about Chief of Police Mr. Kraft of the Greenwood Police Department on a website called appnews.com. In an article called Longtime Officer is Named Police Chief in Mississippi City, dated January 10th, 2021. It said, Greenwood, Mississippi, a longtime police officer is moving up to become chief in a Mississippi city. Terrence Kraft has worked for the Greenwood Police Department for 17 years. He was promoted last week from captain to chief the Greenwood Commonwealth reported. This is a challenging time for law enforcement. I am more than ready to embrace it, Kraft told officials at a city council meeting Tuesday. You'll find that my administration will be one based on respect, communication, and collaboration. I will lead by a team approach. Kraft is very professional, very smart, very capable of doing his job, Mayor Carolyn McAdams said. I really and truly think he has the opportunity to become one of the best chiefs Greenwood has ever had. Kraft, 39, is a native of nearby Itabena. He started with the Greenwood Police Department as a patrol officer, moved to the Narcotics Division, and has guided the training and certification process for police officers and dispatchers. He has helped with recruiting. His predecessor, Jody Bradley, will remain as the department's executive administrator. The management role includes overseeing the budget and accreditation, ordering equipment, and issuing new releases, the mayor said. Bradley, 72, was appointed chief by the council in late 2019, but is not certified police officer. The role of executive administrator does not require law enforcement certification, McAdams said. Kraft's duties as chief will include managing public safety operations, such as organizing patrols, making assessments to officers, and handling their promotions, McAdams said. This concludes what the article stated about recently appointed police chief of the Greenwood Police Department, Police Chief Kraft. And might I say that the article is correct on its finding about the Chief of Police, Mr. Kraft. I, for one, thought that he came off very professional and courteous during our phone call. I have hopes now that the police will possibly be able to get my case reopened and investigated properly because of the findings that will be put on the amended police report. I was told that the report needs to be newly made, meaning Mr. Kraft told me I should start over with a new police report, so that's the plan so far. Be sure if anything changes, I'll let you all know. The coronavirus pandemic has, in my opinion, prolonged my investigation and caused problems within the investigation of my case. I think that the coronavirus pandemic has caused delays in actions and reactions of prosecutorial and police authorities. It can seem frustrating to me at times during this coronavirus pandemic when I'm dealing with my case. Not only has the coronavirus prolonged my investigation, but as well, Detective Melton of the Greenwood Police Department, who was over my case last year, was not cooperative during the investigation and also was, in my opinion, very unprofessional in the handling of my case. I will not work with Detective Melton again on my case with the Greenwood Police Department. Someone other than him will have to take on my case. Will have to be assigned to investigate it, but I'm not quite sure who at this time will be taking it on. Detective Melton told me that my findings with my breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund were not correct when they were correct. I even had the Secret Service verify that they were correct. The Secret Service opened my case up in June of last year and I speak about this in my other podcast episode. I had them investigate my case because Trustmark Bank in Greenwood, Mississippi had been working with attorneys at Melton law firm with a fraudulent bank account associated with identity theft and my mother's name. The identity theft the attorney Floyd Melton Jr. at Melton Law Firm in Greenwood, Mississippi is involved in also stems into multiple states in the United States. The attorneys are using other people's Social Security numbers to launder money and steal money from their clients. So essentially, Brenda B. Flowers, my mom, was involved with attorney Floyd Melton Jr. at Melton Law Firm with identity theft and with the breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund. I have been trying to get the police in Greenwood for the longest time to investigate this. Not only have I been trying to get the police in Greenwood to investigate this, but I've also been trying to get the FBI to investigate it. The Secret Service stopped investigating my case last year because they said the U.S. Attorney's Office in Oxford, Mississippi didn't see any crime being committed. I also couldn't get a definite answer out of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Oxford, Mississippi as to why they couldn't see any crime being committed. I will be posting another episode shortly about what I went through with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Oxford, Mississippi, and speak about how the U.S. attorneys over my case are, I suspect, trying to protect the organized criminals working at Melton's law firm that are running the judicial system in Greenwood, Mississippi, by stopping the Secret Service from investigating my case. I've had many setbacks in my case with people in high-up positions within the government trying to stop me from having my case properly investigated by government entities that are legally entitled to do so and later bring up indictments on these organized criminals. It doesn't surprise me that the Greenwood Police Department lost my police report. It doesn't surprise me one bit. But regardless if the Greenwood Police Department lost my police report, I'm still going to pursue having my breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund investigated by the Greenwood Police Department. I have every right to have a detective there properly investigate my case. The only way the police are going to be able to fight these white-collar criminals is to hold their corrupt businesses and corporations accountable. Until then, the Melton and Trotter crime family in Greenwood, Mississippi are just going to keep running their organized criminal enterprise and the judicial system. Why do you think the Greenwood Police Department lost my police report in Greenwood? Jackson, Mississippi Police Department didn't lose my police report. Jackson, Mississippi opened up my case in January 2020 and would later send my case to the Greenwood Police Department where the crime originates. I contacted the police in Jackson, Mississippi and explained to the detective that my mother and my sister, Claire Flowers, had a bank account open with another person's Social Security number at Trustmark Bank. I told the detective in Jackson, Mississippi that I wanted him to speak with Trustmark Bank's main branch in Jackson about the account that was open with my mother and this other person's Social Security number she was using with the help of white-collar attorney Floyd Melton Jr. Later in my investigation, The Secret Service gave me verification in July of 2020 that it was indeed identity theft associated with my mom's name and this other person's social security number that she was using with Trustmark Bank. The Secret Service were able to verify the person's name the social security number belonged to that my mother and my sister were using with identity theft. The social security number belonged to Sandra K. Hayes. Currently, I have a great winning case against Trustmark Bank because I called the bank in January of 2020 when I was investigating my case. During my phone call, I inquired with one of the bank tellers about the social security number and bank account number my mother was using under her name. I explained to the bank teller that I had a bank statement in front of my face right now with my mom's name on it and what I thought to be my tax ID number from my trust fund. I asked the bank teller to do a search in the system and see if the bank account was still open under my tax ID number and my mother's name. My mother, Brenda B. Flowers, had guardian ad litem over my trust fund from 1980 up until her death in 2006. I thought that my tax ID number associated with my trust fund was never rendered over to me when my trust was closed by attorney Floyd Melton Jr. in March of 2007. But what I verbally gave to the bank teller was not a tax ID number, but it was actually another person's social security number. But that's not what Detective Layton told me when he was investigating my case last year. Detective Layton of the Greenwood Police Department told me that it was a typo that I had on the bank statement. But the Secret Service verified that it was not a typo and that it was indeed another person's social security number. The bank teller at Trustmark Bank would later tell me the lady's name the social security number belonged to that my mother was using is Hayes. I told the Secret Service agent what the bank teller told me, and the agent verified that it was true what the bank teller told me. The social security number belonged to a lady named Sandra K. Hayes. I have a great winning case right now against Trustmark Bank, and I plan on suing them for the millions that my mother and white-collar attorneys at Melton's law firm embezzled from my trust fund, but first I need an attorney. And unfortunately at this time, I don't have the money to retain one. The people involved with my mother when she was embezzling from my trust fund was attorney Floyd Melton Jr., and I suspect other people like my sister Claire Flowers. I will always suspect my mother was murdered because of her involvement with the embezzlement of my trust fund at the time when she died of a heart attack when she was under attorney Floyd Melton's care. My mother, Brenda B. Flowers, died August 25, 2006 from a heart attack while attorney Floyd Melton III's brother-in-law, Dr. John Trotter, was her cardiologist when she died from her heart attack. Dr. John Trotter is one of the people that will also be indicted with my breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund. If you want to learn more about Dr. John Trotter and his involvement with my breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund, then please listen to episode 5 on my podcast. It explains who Dr. John Trotter is and how he is related to my case. My breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund is a huge case. My mother and I were in Melton law firm a couple of times when she mentioned to me that I had under $5 million in World War II Series E bonds in my trust fund, left to me by my grandmother and my grandfather on my father's side, my biological father, Dr. Tom Boring. But I didn't get all this money when my trust was closed in 2007. As a matter of fact, the attorneys at Melton Law Firm, Attorney Floyd Melton Jr., gave me no verification that I even owned bonds in my trust that were left to me by my grandparents. When my trust was closed in March of 2007, I only got $350,000, so they're going to have to come up with the rest of the money that they embezzled from me. The attorneys involved with the breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund are career criminals. They make a living off of laundering money that they steal from their clients. They are politically connected white-collar criminals. The FBI estimates that white-collar criminals cost the U.S. economy more than $300 billion a year. The white-collar crimes associated with the breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund have caused serious negative impact on me and my family's life. These white-collar attorneys at Melton Law Firm and their families are admired by many people in Mississippi as Christian, church-going, good folks that wouldn't hurt a fly. This is one of the reasons that it's hard for me to get people to take my case seriously. Not only do I have a breach of fiduciary with my trust fund with Melton Law Firm and Trustmark Bank in Greenwood, Mississippi, but I will also be able to sue civilly Attorney Floyd Melton III at Melton Law Firm and my little brother, Knox Flowers, who is the executor of my mother's estate for mishandling her estate. I will be able to sue for my mother's estate that they mishandled when it's all said and done, and be sure, if the courts find that they mishandled my trust fund and my mother's estate, then I'm sure they also mishandled my stepdad's estate as well. So I will also be able to sue civilly for his estate that they mishandled. I'm hoping the police in Greenwood, Mississippi, when they start getting my case investigated properly, that they will reach out to agencies responsible for helping them assist in investigating these white-collar attorneys at Melton's law firm. Roughly, I'm speaking about the IRS, SEC, the Occupational Safety and Secret Service, and FBI. And believe me, I'm sure they're going to have their job cut out for them, because no telling how many bank accounts these people have had over the past 20 years and how much money they have laundered with their ill-gotten gains by spending their dirty money on property. I can only imagine. Can you imagine all the people involved with my case? There are quite a few people that will be indicted with my case when it's all said and done. And I know every day that my life is in danger, but that's not going to stop me from coming here and telling you all about the true crime stories associated with the breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund. I mean, seriously, my true crime stories concerning my breach of fiduciary I have with my trust is the story of the century in the Mississippi Delta concerning white-collar crime and organized crime. Please stay tuned for more stories about true crime and portrait photography dropping weekly on my podcast. If you have any questions about my episode, then please feel free to drop me a comment as to what you are curious about and didn't understand in the episode. Please subscribe and leave a comment. Until then, I'll see you next episode. Bye, everyone.